Why do we go birding? It's a question that everyone in the community might have a different answer to. Birding is a great way to get out in nature and appreciate the Earth's wonderful array of biodiversity. It can also be a social outlet or a way to distract oneself from the difficulties of everyday life. Many birders, including to some degree myself, use birding as a competition, challenging themselves to see as many unique species as they can in a period of time. All of these things motivate me to get out in the field, but the greatest memories that I take away from birding typically come from the long, action-packed, intense days. There's nothing like waking up before dawn to a chorus of songbirds and spending the entire day outside looking for more. More specifically, what I'm talking about is often termed in the birding community as a big day. So Peter, you might be asking, what exactly is a big day? Well, luckily, I've got the Birding But Cool dictionary here to help us out with that. Basically, a big day is when a birder attempts to see as many unique bird species as they possibly can in one calendar day. It's basically a squished down version of a big year, a concept that may be more recognizable to some birders. Basically, if a big year is a marathon, a big day is a sprint, an all-out push to the 24-hour finish line. Midnight to midnight, you're going intensely for the entire day. As someone who doesn't have nearly the time to commit to 365 days of high-stress and high-intensity birding, the big day is perfect. It's a work of art, a combination of meticulous preparation, mental stamina, and birds. In my opinion, there are three main components that go into a successful big day. The first one, obviously, is the ability to identify bird species very well. Having lots of experience identifying birds in the field is particularly helpful on big days because of the need to move very quickly from one location to the next. Identifying a bird from a quick glimpse takes less time than needing a few extra minutes to view it. That being said, it's also important to know your boundaries as a birder. For example, I am not world-class, perfect, I'm not that good, and there are definitely things I run into in the field that I just cannot ID. Sometimes you have to accept that you're not going to know what it is, leave it, and let it go. The next important component is planning. A big day typically consists of a lot of birding in a very small time window, so every minute of the day must be used in the most efficient way possible. Constructing a rough schedule for the day allows you to ensure this. A key part of planning is gathering information. By knowing exactly where the birds are, you can figure out where to go and when. Thanks to online platforms like eBird, you can gather a lot of information without even leaving the house if you're short on time. But many birders, such as myself, do a little bit of scouting before their big day if possible. This gives you a concrete feel for the areas you might be visiting, limiting surprises on the special day. The final component is often overlooked, but in my opinion, to complete a successful big day, you need stamina. One must be able to maintain a high energy level for basically the entire 24 hours. It might not always be necessary that you quite literally spend every minute of the day birding, but either way, it's a lot of time without any sleep, and birding can be pretty physically and mentally draining when you're going for that long, especially considering that you're typically moving pretty fast on big days and it can get intense. Being able to push and work hard even into the final hours of the day can make a big difference in your tally when it's said and done. At this point, I know what you're probably thinking, so let me clarify. I am by no means the worldwide expert on big days. That being said, though, I have a fair bit of experience, having done 7 in many different areas across the North American continent. I've done them alone, with friends, in the spring, and in the fall. I've been through the highs and the lows and learned a lot along the way. This year, I knew I wanted to embark on my 8th big day in Alberta, but I wasn't sure where. The entire province felt like too large of an undertaking, so that was out of the question. But if not the entire province, then what? Thankfully, eBird comes to our aid here. You see, eBird classifies all observations based on a hierarchy of political and geographical jurisdictions. Contained within Alberta are a handful of what I believe to be provincial census units that eBird, given its American origins, calls counties. These are much bigger than American counties and are actually bigger than some American states, but the size is perfect for the type of big day I'm aiming for. Let's take a look at the region that I've chosen. Okay, so this is my big day region right here. It's on eBird. It's called Camrose Lloydminster County. I guess they've named it after the two biggest cities. Camrose is right here, and then Lloydminster is over here on the border. This is an area where I like birding a lot. Watchers of the Birding But Cool channel will, well, you might not recognize, but this is Whitford Lake right here. So that will be familiar to Birding But Cool fans. There's a lot of really good area in here. A lot of it is sort of agriculture or wetlands, and so you can see a lot of waterfowl, water birds, shorebirds, things like this. But there is a bit of forest, as you can see, interspersed throughout. There are a few key areas here, and typically the thing with doing big days in a bounded region is the boundaries are very important because that's where you sort of get your edge cases. When I was planning this big day, I kind of started out just doing exactly basically what I'm doing now, looking on Google Earth and sort of seeing if I can point out unique habitats with my eyes. And the first thing that stuck to me is this little corner of forest over in the east. So if we zoom out, we actually see this is sort of the southern edge of the Canadian boreal forest. And it's sort of contiguous with, you know, this just massive area of northern forest here, and we just sort of get the southern edge of it. This area, if you go on eBird, nobody's ever birded here. Well, if you go on eBird, you'll see my reports, but spoilers, don't, you know, unless you want to be spoiled. But this area, you know, I can look at it on the map, and I do see some pretty decent forested area here. It's hard to tell how much of it is coniferous or what the construction of the forest is. It does look a little bit fragmented. There's definitely some oil action going on here for people who are not from the Canadian North. These little pullouts with the sort of squares, this indicates an oil well typically. So people are extracting oil out here, but all these roads are public, so you can drive through here and you can bird. However, I've never been here, and so some scouting is going to be necessary. So that's one area that sort of jumped out at me. The other area is much more well scouted, and it's this area of forest on the west boundary of the region. This is actually Elk Island National Park, one of the, I believe, 5 national parks in Alberta. It's just about 45 minutes away from Edmonton. It's some very beautiful aspen parkland habitat. I wouldn't class it as boreal forest, so there still might be some unique species to get out east. But the aspen parkland is also home to some unique birds on its own. And Elk Island is well known for a lot of these things. This would be species like great crested flycatcher, Philadelphia vireo, maybe veery, purple finch, things like this are going to be, probably we will see them at Elk Island. Another important thing we want to look for is lakes. Now, the reason I bring this up is because Elk Island actually has one of the bigger lakes in the region. This is a Stoughton Lake, and it's actually quite unique because it's one of the best places in the county to see Barrow's goldeneye. But the thing about lakes is you will get, especially deep water lakes, I should say, deeper, bigger lakes will be a good spot for migratory waterfowl, particularly sea ducks and diving ducks. So this could be things like scoters, potentially a red-breasted merganser thrown in there. Even a common merganser would be pretty good. So looking for big lakes is always key. Whitford is a big lake, but it's actually quite shallow, which I know from having birded there over and over again. So that doesn't really fit our criterion. Beaver Hill Lake is right here, although as you can kind of tell from the map, it's actually mostly dried out. Beaver Hill Lake has a great birding history that I'm not going to get into today. There is still a lot of good wetland area, as you can see, a lot of these small little pothole ponds, but it's not, you know, it's not a big lake that's going to have sea ducks in it. The other one is actually down in the southwestern boundary, and this is Buffalo Lake. It's a pretty big lake. Now, as you can see, half of it is technically outside of our region, but the rule that I'm going to apply is as long as I'm viewing the individual from the Camrose Lloydminster area, it counts. And as you can see, there's a little community on the north side of the lake where we can view some things. So this is a big lake, and hopefully there will be some unique water birds on there. One more habitat type, and it's not the most exciting thing that we will want to look for, is urban areas. One thing you might notice is I'm going through each individual habitat type because that's what you want to do. You want to survey a diverse amount of habitat types. So you want to try to get as many different habitats as you can. And urban areas they're an important habitat where a lot of birds are only found in urban areas. You can see that this is mostly rural. The biggest cities are still not really that big, maybe 100,000 people in Camrose. There are a lot of smaller towns that would sort of satisfy my desires for things like Eurasian collared dove, pigeon, house sparrow, house finch. I mean, these are birds that seem really common, but you do have to think about them. Another one that's not necessarily an urban exploiter, but is a bird that's easier to find around people, is ruby-throated hummingbird. They're pretty rare in northern Alberta, and typically when you see them, they're at hummingbird feeders. So can never hurt to sort of scout out some of these smaller towns. You can kind of see some of the smaller ones here, like this is Toefield, this is I think Riley. All these smaller towns, and sort of scout them out and see what you can find. And then the last main habitat type that I'm interested in is kind of down south. It's kind of near Buffalo Lake conveniently. And this is another area I haven't visited. It's just on the fringe. And what you see here is this is the Battle River. It's actually a pretty small river. And I'm no geology expert, but based on the area around it, it probably used to be a bit bigger. And this doesn't show up super well in the satellite imagery, but basically what we have here is a little bit of a canyon that has been eroded away by the river, and now what's remaining of the Battle River is quite small. It's just sort of this windy little stream. But what we get here is you can see there's these sort of white-looking cliff-esque things here. And if you're from sort of the interior west, these might be familiar to you as badlands. At least that's what I'm going to call them. And badlands are a very unique habitat for a lot of interesting bird species, things like spotted towhee in Alberta, rock wren, lark sparrow, and a bunch of other cool stuff that is going to be really, really hard to find anywhere else in the Camrose-Lloydminster region. So already off the top of my head, I'm thinking about this northeastern area. I'm thinking about Elk Island. I'm thinking about Beaver Hill Lake. I'm thinking about Whitford. I'm thinking about Buffalo Lake. And I'm thinking about this Badlands area along the Battle River. And that's going to be the start of my scouting, because a lot of these areas I haven't visited. So in the next episode of Birding But Cool, in the next part of this series, I'm going to scout this area. I'm going to go to all these places that I've just described, and I'm going to see what birds I can find. And this is going to help me devise a plan for the actual big day that will be optimal, it will be quick, it will be efficient, and it will be informed. So that's what we'll have next time. That's right, next time you will see me scouting my region, going to all the places I just described, and seeing what's there. Make sure you're subscribed to Birding But Cool. Make sure you have your notification bell turned on so you can see whenever I'm going to upload. And I will see you then. Thanks so much for watching, and happy birding.